A mysterious phone invitation from a vacation villa reveals the secret of a love affair. Suman, it's your turn next. The discovery of an unnamed body in a small mountain village leads to an ugly past. Suman. Help me. Suman participated in the game for money and awakened his resurrection talent. While others were busy scaring, she was calculating how to get the resurrection card. You're dead, aren't you? Attention everyone, you're faking a corpse. Fellow players were in chaos. Why are you still alive? The horror object, which had been fighting again and again, finally collapsed. What should Suman do with the sudden appearance of horror coins, the choice between reality and the gaming world? Someone held a handful of coins and performed affectionately, "Stay, these are all yours. I will be your gentle knight, and I will make you king." Keywords of the novel. Unlimited resurrection without pop-ups in survival game. Unlimited resurrection in survival game TXT complete collection download. Unlimited resurrection in survival game latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Vacation Villa 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Vacation Villa 1. Suman owed a lot of money, and the debt collectors had visited for countless times. Apart from her, there was also a wall with scars, and there was no place to hide even cockroaches in the clean house. Unlike her, her neighbor is very wealthy and often shows off in front of her, often belittling her with words. Looking at his ugly face, she sometimes fantasizes about her neighbor's money becoming her own, but doesn't want this opportunity to come so suddenly. Help me. The chubby face of the neighbor suddenly enlarged in front of him, filled with fear, panic, and a hint of unwillingness. I have so much money. Why would I still die? Before Suman could react, the neighbor's uncle transformed into a spot of light in front of her, leaving only a black card in place. Suman's heart thumped for a moment, and almost the next second she calmed down again. She looked left and right, then bent down to pick up the card and stuffed it into her pocket. She walked into the door with her head closed. Faced with such an abnormal scene, she had no intention of reporting to the police. The people living here were all garbage, and she was the same. If she died, she would die, and no one would care. She thought it would be a bank card or something, but she didn't want it. The card looked very ordinary and there was no useful news. She was a bit disappointed. And the mutation also happened at this moment. She only felt a flash of white light before her eyes, and the familiar house disappeared. She appeared in a strange place. I couldn't see my fingers around me, it was a bit terrifying black. And in front of her, a light curtain appeared. Identity card confirmation. Are you sure you want to participate in the thriller game? Suman didn't rush to make a choice, just asked, "Can I give you money?" In the game, there are countless treasures that can be monetized as long as the player has the ability. Without hesitation, Suman confirmed that as long as she had money, she could do anything. After choosing, the black card reappeared in her hand, with a slight difference. Her name appeared on it. Identity cards cannot be taken and will always follow the player, recording player assets. At the moment Suman received the ID card, she finally showed her first sincere smile of the day. Sure enough, she was right, that was the reason why the garbage neighbor became rich. Suman, you're also here. As soon as Suman withdrew his shocked gaze from the townhouse, he met a strange face dragging luggage in the distance. She had thought that this thriller game would be outrageous, but she didn't expect it to be so outrageous. The place in front of her was like a resort, completely identical to the real world. However, the light in her eyes became brighter and brighter, and the more so, the more it showed that the light curtain was not deceiving her. High risk is the only way to have high returns. Ah, you're here too. Suman hid all her emotions in her heart and nodded at the stranger. She didn't use her to talk, so the man in front of him put his hands on her shoulder and began to roast. You came here after receiving a call, didn't you? Mysteriously, I didn't say anything when I asked, hey, just let me come here. Is there something wrong with you? Telephone. Suman dug into his pocket, opened his phone, and there was indeed a received call in the communication record. Yes, that's the number. It's mysterious and mysterious, but if it weren't so mysterious, I wouldn't have come. The man scanned the number on the screen and wanted to say something more. Someone came not far away and called out his name. Jobin, are you also here? Suman looked around and saw a combination of a man and a woman. The woman looked around with a hint of surprise on her face. My friend, who Kansas? Jobin was interrupted and forgot what to say. He turned around to explain to her and rushed forward to embrace who Kansas. Brother, how long haven't we seen each other? Suman only looked at her without making a sound, but it was the woman who, perhaps seeing that she was also a woman, left behind her nonsense and spoke to her. What's your name? Are you also a player? Is this really a game? It's so realistic. Suman raised a fake smile and said, I'm sorry, I don't know what you're talking about. The woman's face turned resentful and she muttered softly, this game is not fun at all. Am I the only player? How can I play it? Hello, Suman, I heard Jobin mention you, Hukan said as he walked over and hugged the woman, saying, this is my girlfriend Humeli. Did Jobin say you also received a call? This person is quite mysterious. Didn't he say we should go to the most central villa? Let's go, together. Suman has no objection, she has already discovered that these people know more than she does, so that's enough for her to follow them. Along the way, listening to Hukan boasting about the luxurious lifestyle he had brought here, they finally arrived at the central villa. At first glance, it is a huge fountain, with sunlight shining and a beautiful rainbow reflecting. The large villa behind it is like a castle in a fairy tale, incredibly beautiful. It's so beautiful. Humeli's previous unpleasant expression disappeared when she saw this big villa, only a hopeful expression. Suman didn't have any special expression, only thinking that in such a big place, there must be a lot of hiding places for terrifying monsters. Hey, look, there seems to be someone inside. Humeli suddenly pointed to a window and exclaimed in surprise. Let's go in and take a look, Jobin said first. Maybe it's the person who invited us. The door was not locked, and a few people easily entered the room. At first glance, I was somewhat surprised that there was more than one person in the room. Suman fell last, his cautious gaze scanning the room, leaving only 3 men. No, there's a woman downstairs from upstairs. It's her, that's what I saw at the window just now. Humeli pointed at the woman who came down the stairs, feeling a little excited. Who Kansas Jobin? The person in the room was also an acquaintance. Didn't you also receive a mysterious phone call to come here? All personnel present, the game officially begins. Please find out who made the mysterious phone call before 6 p.m. in the evening. Failure to complete the task will result in punishment. Suddenly, a light curtain appeared in front of Suman. She instinctively looked in front of Humeli and didn't see any light curtain, but saw the excited expression on Humeli's face. She understood that she could only see the light curtain in front of her. Hey, have you seen the task? There is really a task. Let's find out who made the mysterious call. Humeli exclaimed excitedly in the next second. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Vacation Villa 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Vacation Villa 2. But she didn't see the imagined scene, and everyone looked at her with an inexplicable expression. What are you talking about? What task? Humeli pursed her lips and said, well, I can't explain anything to you NPCs, it's nothing. I'm sorry everyone, my girlfriend used to be different, Hukan said awkwardly as if to ease the awkwardness. He said again, however, we really need to find out who made this mysterious phone call. He always calls us here for a reason, right? What he said was reasonable, and everyone selectively ignored Humeli. They just looked at each other and said, how can we find it? Suman took out his phone and said, there's a number, why don't you dial over and take a look? Everyone looked at her, but she put away her phone and looked back at them. Let's fight. Zhou Bin watched as she tentatively spoke, and everyone else stared at her. Sorry, I don't call strangers. Suman refused very directly. This. I'll do it. Zhou Bin never expected Suman to answer like this. With an awkward cough, he took over the task. But surprisingly, there was no signal on their phones. Everyone took out their phones and found that everyone's phones had no signal. Everyone's gaze coincidentally focused on the landline on the coffee table in front of them. What Suman didn't expect was that the phone could still be connected. It's just that, there were no phone ringtones ringing around. Suman calmly looked at the faces of everyone around him. Everyone's expressions were not particularly special, just curious people leaned their ears to listen to the phone. Zila. Zizi. The phone was suddenly connected and there was a piercing sound of electricity coming out. Everyone is silently waiting for the voice on the other side of the phone. Is it you called us? Zhou Bin's sudden voice startled everyone who was focused. Facing the glaring gaze, he smiled awkwardly and explained in a low voice, the sound of electricity makes me nervous. It gives me courage, but I want to go to the restroom. I have 3 anxieties, which I can't hold back. He awkwardly put the receiver into his joking hand and turned to run to the restroom. Zzz. The sound of electricity became increasingly urgent. Hukan was closest to the phone because of Zhou Bin's words. He felt a chill in his back and goosebumps. Just as he asked everyone with his gaze if they wanted to hang up, a sound suddenly came from the receiver. You will all pay the price, he said in an extremely hoarse and long-pitched voice, rough as if scratching on sandpaper. The sound seemed to be suddenly released and was extremely clear, reaching everyone's ears. Hu Meili stroked the goosebumps on her arm and muttered softly, is this the one named Zhou Bin pretending to be mischievous? Suman had originally guessed this way, but she suddenly noticed that Hukan and the woman upstairs had exchanged a glance, and then threw away the receiver as if frightened. What's wrong? Do you know who it is? Suman wouldn't give them a chance to pretend to be confused and immediately asked. No, I don't know. Hukan wiped away the non-existent sweat on his forehead and shook his head in panic. I was just scared. You must know, Hukansis, didn't you say I was your girlfriend? If you don't tell anyone, you have to tell me. Are you not in love with me? Hu Meili's mind suddenly lit up at this moment, but Hukan didn't mean to talk to her. He even got angry at her and said, don't bother me. I said I don't know anything. After saying these words, Hukan shook his sleeves and walked upstairs with a restless expression on his face. The woman who had previously met him followed closely upstairs. Hu Meili bit her lips and sat on the sofa, feeling full of anger. After hesitating for a moment, she also followed suit. Suman and the remaining few looked at each other. Those few people were also unfamiliar with Suman, and with polite and awkward smiles, they turned around and went upstairs. Suman was lost in thought, and it seemed that the key should lie with Hukan and that woman. The receiver was still hanging at the edge of the table, and Suman glanced at the landline screen. The phone had already hung up. She picked up the receiver and prepared to put it back in its original position, but unexpectedly, as soon as she received it, another sound came from inside the receiver. Zila, it's your turn next, Suman. Suman. A shout from behind unexpectedly coincided with the voice on the phone. She snapped the phone and turned around, only to see Hu Meili standing at the staircase at some point, staring at her expressionlessly. Staring for 2 seconds, Hu Meili remained silent and turned away, as if she had only come to call out her name. Suman was about to follow up when she suddenly thought of what she had heard on the phone, so she stopped abruptly. Hu Meili went back and forth, still looking down at her from the staircase. The two of them froze here, and for a moment, the space was quiet as if they could hear a needle landing on the ground. Finally, Hu Meili spoke up first and said, Suman, Bin is dead. It's your turn next. She stood in the backlit position, not sure if it was a visual illusion. Suman felt her eyes particularly dark, and her heart pounded, unable to determine whether she was excited or afraid for a moment. Just as I was about to ask something, I heard a piercing scream from a woman in the distance. Turning her head again, Humeli had already disappeared. What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? The crowd who heard the commotion appeared in a grand presence, and Humeli was also among them. Suman, what's wrong? Hukan frowned and asked her. I don't know. Suman calmed down for a moment and was honest. I don't know what your name is. Humeli ate her stomach at Hukan and Aya's place. She couldn't get angry for a moment and threw all her anger at Suman. I didn't scream, it's not me, Suman said honestly, glancing at her twice. Who else can it be if it's not you? There are only 3 girls in total, Aya and I are upstairs, and you are downstairs. Humeli still seemed to have taken gunpowder. By the way, where's Bin? Hukan, who was not in the mood to fuss and pester Humeli, heard her words and felt a jolt in her heart. Finally, she remembered Bin who had gone to the bathroom before. Bin may have died, Suman told him with a slightly uncertain tone. The air suddenly froze, and everyone looked at her with eerie eyes. Humeli told me. Suman pointed to Humeli's direction. Don't talk nonsense. Hukan, I've always been with you. Humeli was both scared and angry, and turned to look at Hukan, asking him to prove it to her. We've always been together and never left the room. How can I tell her? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Vacation Villa 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Vacation Villa 3. Besides, why did Bin die? Isn't it a game? How could a game die? Humeli became increasingly angry as she spoke. I'm not playing anymore. I'm going home. How can I quit this game? She shouted into the air, I need to go back, take me back. Going back is naturally impossible. Suman's gaze only lingered on her for a moment, then turned to Hukan, who was staring blankly at Humeli, and asked him, is what Humeli said true? Ah yes, Hukan finally snapped back to his senses. We've always been together, so that can't be beauty. He wanted to ask more, but Suman nodded and interrupted, that could be someone who looks the same as Humeli. Are you mistaken? Hukan wanted to say something for Humeli. It's impossible, I can't have misread it, Suman said with certainty. Since we're not sure about Bin's situation, let's go find him together. Perhaps these will only have results when we see Bin. There are only a few bathrooms here, and they finally found Bin in the bathroom at the end of the 2nd floor. Ah! The first person to enter the bathroom screamed and sat on the ground without any warning. Bin is really dead. A group of people rushed into the bathroom with a calm face. Bin's clothes were all gone, like a white chicken lying on the ground. There were no wounds on his body, but a large amount of blood gushed out from under him. His eyes were wide open, and his face was still filled with a happy smile, as if he had seen the most beautiful thing in the world before he died. Bin. Hukan looked at the body with relaxed eyes and murmured, he's really dead, Aya, Bin is dead. He turned to look at Aya, who had never spoken much, and his face turned pale. Aren't you planning to say something yet? Maybe the next one is you. Suman stared at them with dark eyes, knowing that the next person might be her, but these people didn't know, so she spoke particularly confidently. Hukan and Aya were both a bit panicked, but still stubbornly denied, I don't know what you're talking about, it's not our business. Bin is dead, we need to report to the police. The phone still has no signal, so they still made an alarm call using that phone. It's not working, this phone is broken. Hukan swallowed a mouthful of saliva, stuttering as he spoke. When the phone was dialed, it was always busy. Let's get out of here. Aya suddenly couldn't bear the agony and spoke up, her face turning pale and her hands clenched without any blood. Nonsense, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. I can't stand it anymore, I want to go home. Mom. Meili, who had been scared and didn't dare to speak since seeing Zhou Bin's body, collapsed and cried loudly after hearing Aya's words. I don't play games anymore, I don't play any games anymore, I want to go home. Who can, please help me, take me away, I don't want to die. Who can seemed to have the same intention, so he didn't refute it. He just politely asked Suman what he meant while leaving, do you want to come with us? Let's go. Suman looked outside and wondered when the originally sunny day had turned cloudy. Can they really leave? Besides, she still doesn't know who made that mysterious phone call. If she doesn't complete the task, she's not afraid to be punished, but can she get the money that belongs to her? After briefly weighing the pros and cons, she chose to stay. After listening to her words, Hukan didn't advise her further. He only said that when he saw the police, he would let them come here. After leaving a message to remind her to be careful, they left. Before those people left, Suman also asked Hukan about the phone call, but Hukan hesitated and didn't say anything in the end. Suman didn't hesitate to let them go, after all, he could never wake a person who pretended to sleep, and there would always be a result in the end. She was the only one left in the vast room. No, there is also Zhou Bin's body. For the corpse, Suman is not afraid. An unconscious thing, no matter how terrifying, can it be more terrifying than humans? But I didn't expect that slapping would come so quickly. Suman died, but not yet. She opened her eyes again and appeared in a room. Her ID card appeared again in her hand, with 2 more lines on it. Talent activation. Resurrection. Suman was still a bit confused. After 2 seconds of reaction, a twisted and crazy smile appeared on his face. To figure out what happened, time has to go back an hour. After Hukan's group left, she searched for useful clues in the villa. And then she really caught some clues. For example, she found a 10-year lease agreement in a room, and the central villa she was in has already been leased to someone else. For example, she found many photos under the floor of a room, including Hukan, Zhou Bin, and Aya. For example, Zhou Bin had a girlfriend who was very affectionate before. Of course, these have nothing specific to do with her resurrection, but she went to inspect Zhou Bin's body after discovering them. And then the mutation happened at that time. She heard something moving in the sink and looked up at Meili's grinning face. Before she could even ask a question, she was beheaded. Yes, she was decapitated by Meili happily, so fast that she didn't have time to react. In the end, her consciousness only saw the wash basin and mirror sprayed red with blood. She thought she must be dead, but she didn't want her consciousness to return to that dark space, where a familiar light curtain appeared. The incident of her death was not mentioned above, only a question was asked, who made the mysterious phone call? Suman thought for a moment and answered with a name. Fortunately, she answered correctly. The text on the screen of light has started to change again. Congratulations to the player for completing the mission and obtaining 50,000 players world currency or 5 thriller coins. Good news, I really have money to take. Bad news, choose either. Under normal circumstances, her first choice would definitely be 50 yuan, but the appearance of this horror coin really made her a little concerned. There will definitely be more tasks in the future, but it's not certain whether this horror coin will reappear. So, without asking about its purpose, she chose the horror coin. Apart from that, there is one thing that makes her happy. King card identity privilege. Meets the talent activation condition. Talent endowments. Resurrection. The light curtain has changed again. Rule. After the game starts, there is an unconditional chance to resurrect. After the opportunity is used, only those who have a resurrection card will trigger the talent again. The resurrection card will be triggered spontaneously. After the resurrection card is triggered, the player will be resurrected in any position for up to 2 hours. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Vacation Villa 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Vacation Villa 4, Tip. Resurrection cards will appear in various forms at any location in the thrilling world. Light points will guide players to the nearest resurrection card location. Players are advised to collect as many resurrection cards as possible and strive to survive. So, as if in a dramatic way, she died, resurrected, and possessed the talent to infinitely resurrect. This is actually not the most impressive. The most impressive thing is that her physical fitness has also strengthened after being resurrected. This was discovered by her after accidentally clicking on the identity card. Her original physical fitness was 10, but now it has become 20, and Xuanxia's original fitness was 5, now it has also become 10. Although it may seem weak, being able to grow is very tempting. Can she imagine that when her physical fitness reaches full level, she can freely walk horizontally here? However, to achieve this, the first step is to find the resurrection card. Otherwise, without a resurrection card, if you die again, you will really die. The light point will guide her to the nearest resurrection card, and she quickly takes action. Unexpectedly, the first nearest location turned out to be the bathroom where Zhou Bin died. Suman hesitated for a moment. She died here once, and it is inevitable that she will encounter Hu Meili again if she goes in alone. Thinking about Hu Meili's quick attack, she shook her head. No, even if she was prepared now, she would definitely fall for it if she entered again. So she briefly weighed the pros and cons and skipped this position. Here, she needed a ghoul to enter with her. Click. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning flashed outside the window, followed by a car coming to a stop outside. She quickly went downstairs and then saw Hu Kan and the others getting off an off-road vehicle in a disheveled state. The car body was covered in mud, and there were dents on the roof, as if it had been hit by something. What's going on? What happened? Didn't you guys leave? Suman asked knowingly, but he was also really curious about what happened that brought them back here. Harm, don't mention it, it's really unlucky. Hu Kan's face was gray, as if his misfortune had reached its extreme, his eyebrows furrowed to the point of building a mountain. When we were halfway down the mountain, the rain suddenly became so heavy that we couldn't see the road clearly. The road was too rough here, and we wanted to take shelter from the rain before walking. However, as soon as we stopped, we were hit by a rock sliding down from the nearby mountain and hit the roof of the car. Hu Kan said with lingering fear, if it weren't for our great fortune, the stone wouldn't be that big, and the position of the falling ground wouldn't be high. We people would all be meat cakes. However, it's also very unlucky. When I was planning to come back here first to avoid it, I almost got trapped by a small mudslide. It was because of the small mudslide that they wasted their time, otherwise they would have returned half an hour ago. Oh, that's it. Suman didn't say anything, but when she turned to see Hu Meili being lifted off the car, she was a little surprised. What's wrong with her? I don't know, I've been talking nonsense since I got on the car and was about to leave. I've been making a fuss all the way, but when I came back, I had a high fever. Hu Kan's tone is not very good, and now he gets annoyed when he looks at Hu Meili's annoying expression. It's already not going well, she doesn't make people worry. Suman looked at Hu Meili's pale face and unconscious appearance, probably she was frightened. Don't worry about her, the rain is really getting heavier and it's annoying. It seems like we can't go down the mountain today. Hu Kan's clothes were all wet and pressed against him, and the cold wind made him involuntarily shiver. He took Suman a step forward and glanced back at the people who were still busy taking care of Hu Meili. He whispered to her, "You're here. Nothing happened, right?" He specifically pointed out, Zhou Bin. No, It's normal. Suman lied and asked him with some meaning, what else happened to you? Who-can shook his head and said, no, just ask, after all, you're in the same room as the dead. Suman did not expose him either. Just as I was sweeping towards that group of people, I noticed a problem with the sudden lightning and casually asked, did you bring someone else when you came back? Who-can's hair stood up in an instant, and his voice wanted to pretend serious but couldn't help but tremble. Don't scare me, where is anyone else? 6 people, Suman pointed to the crowd busy picking up luggage by the car, how could it be? Who-can almost shouted out. Originally, there were only 8 of them. Bin died and there were still 7 people left. Now that he and Suman are both here, there should only be 5 people left by the car. He boldly looked over there and murmured, 1, 2, 5. His gaze moved and his voice trembled, 6. He swallowed a mouthful of water with difficulty, and looked at Suman in horror. There were really 6 people. Damn it, where did he bring anyone back? His back felt a chill and his legs were so weak that he wanted to kneel down. The people were not far in front of him, but he was dizzy and couldn't distinguish their faces clearly. It seemed that he couldn't even find one more person. Suman calmly reminded him on the side, call out their names and let them enter the room one by one. She didn't remember who the men who didn't know their names were, so she didn't know who was redundant. I heard that some evil spirits are not allowed to enter someone else's house unless someone invites them. If that's the case, we shouldn't invite them. Suman whispered about a rumor he had heard before. However, the latter half of the sentence was held in my heart and didn't say that if it weren't for that evil spirit, they might have to explain it here. However, this risk must be taken, and the unknown is the most dangerous. Suman does not like this kind of fearful unknown. And it's obvious that they're going to spend the night here today, so we absolutely can't let the extra dirt sneak into the house. Who-can was in a panic now. Whatever Suman said, he acted like a decree and lost his ability to think. With a trembling voice, he spoke, Aya, come in. Aya walked over without knowing why. Without explaining anything, he pushed her into the room and said, don't come out. Immediately afterwards, he used the same method to call the others over as well. Meili was still carried over by someone, and everyone gathered at the door with a bewildered expression on their faces. Until they found that both Suman and Who-can were still staring in the direction of the off-road vehicle. Ha! Is there still someone over there? A lonely figure stood by the car in the darkness, finally seen by someone, and let out a soft sigh. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Vacation Villa 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Vacation Villa 5. Shut your mouth. Who-can almost cursed his mother. And the black image, as if hearing any movement, slowly twisted its neck 180 degrees and looked towards them. Just as a lightning bolt struck, it illuminated the night sky and also illuminated the figure. A pale face stared straight in their direction. Zhou. As soon as someone pointed at the dark figure and stuttered, Suman quickly covered the person's mouth. Are you looking for me? The figure suddenly grinned at them, it's me, Bin. Are you looking for me? I didn't see how he moved. The next second, a big face suddenly turned against everyone. His eyes were pitch black, and all the light fell on them, sucking in. Why don't you call me by my name? Why don't you call me in? It's raining hard outside. Ghost. The person covered by Suman struggled to spit out 2 words from between his fingers, and then slid down to the ground. Suman saw something bad and quickly turned his head to run into the house. She doesn't have a resurrection card now, so she can't die for nothing. Even faster than her were those who were already scared out of their wits. They all said that danger can unleash a person's potential. Even Meili, who had been talking nonsense before, jumped 3 feet into the room at any time. The others were squeezing me, and I was squeezing you hard inside that small doorway. Suman stood relatively close to the outside. Although she reacted quickly, she couldn't withstand the push of the big man. She was squeezed out and couldn't get in. Don't stand next to me. Get lost. Get lost. Get out of my way. A muscular man leaning against her didn't squeeze in either. He was extremely scared and suddenly went berserk. He pulled open Suman beside him and forcefully kicked the person in front of him in the back, forcing him to kick out a path. The people in front fell into the door in a swarm, and only Suman was thrown away and fell one step behind, but there was still time. She disregarded her sore shoulder and quickly got up to enter the room. Unexpectedly, the people inside closed the door. Only one step away, she was locked outside the door. Speaking of which, this series only happened between lightning and flint. In the moment when a cold and icy patch pressed against her, Suman's heart pounded with a thud. It was over. Turning quickly, Jobin lowered his head and almost pressed his face against hers. At that moment, her mind was incredibly clear, and only one thought remained in her heart. The people in the room had harmed her, and her death would not make them feel better. Yes, she plans to put in a fight and try to get Jobin into the house. And just as this thought flashed through her, a light curtain suddenly appeared in front of her. This thriller is aimed at players who have not completed the task. It has been detected that the player has completed the task, and two options are provided for selection. 1. Players can choose to release thrillers into the room, but they will also bear the punishment. The time limit is 1 night, and the punishment ends at dawn 2. Players can choose to release thrillers and leave, and neither the player nor other players need to accept punishment. She almost understood in an instant that those people didn't have to come back here alive. If they didn't come back, this thing wouldn't come back with them. She has completed the task and will be safe today, but they not only brought back this one, but also locked her, the most innocent person, outside when they encountered danger. Damn it. Jobin, come in. Suman smiled gently, which was a bit creepy. Without hesitation, she chose plan 1. No one wants to take advantage of her. I'm sorry, she's the kind of brainless person who kills 1,000 enemies and harms 800 from herself, and she always seeks revenge. As her words fell, the door opened with a click. Jobin slid into the room like a ghost. Ah! Ghosts! The crowd inside the room, who had been watching the battle with their cat's eyes closed, shouted and dispersed in an instant. A loud slap rang out, followed by a figure flying out. As soon as Suman entered the room, she saw Jobin slapping and knocking away a man who was scared out of his wits by a ghostly roar. She recognized him as the man she had previously covered her mouth and couldn't stop talking. Ghosts. His words are still verbose now. Jobin rudely pulled him away again. The man felt that his bones were all broken and he couldn't even breathe. He lay on the ground, tears in his eyes filled with grievances. Why only hit me? Jobin stared at him with dark eyes and even explained to him seriously, because you scolded me, I'm Jobin. You are Jobin. The person was about to cry without tears, but watched as Jobin tried to give him another try and swallowed the rest of the words with difficulty. Although Jobin may be a creeper, he unexpectedly rationalized. Sitting on the sofa at this moment, I couldn't even see how terrifying it was. Then everyone also noticed that as long as he didn't speak recklessly, Jobin wouldn't make any inappropriate moves, so he gradually relaxed a bit. Hukin hesitated for a moment and sat next to Suman, looking guilty. Suman, I'm sorry. What's wrong? Everyone knows it well. We were just too scared and didn't want to lock you out, it was just an accident. Hukan was a bit anxious to explain to her. It's okay, Suman nodded magnanimously anyway. Jobin was also released by her. Looking at her very articulate appearance, Hukan licked her face and asked, if you're not angry, can you tell me how you made Jobin not attack you? He spoke and glanced at Jobin. He saw clearly from the cat's eye that Jobin wanted to attack, but for some reason, he changed his mind in the end. Do you want to know? Suman's eyes deepened. Of course, this place is so secluded. If we have a way to leave, why don't we leave quickly? Hukan rubbed his hands. You saw it too. Zhou Bin is clearly dead, but now he appears in front of us like nothing happened. Aren't you afraid? He deliberately lowered his voice and said. Suman glanced at Zhou Bin and then at Hukan, who was eager to find a solution. He lowered his gaze slightly and said, Okay, I can tell you, you come with me. The two of them went upstairs. Suman, didn't you say you wanted to tell me a solution? Why did you bring me here? Hukan stood at the entrance of the second-floor bathroom, feeling uncomfortable and wanting to pee. Zhou Bin died here. The method is inside. Suman twisted the door handle and pushed open the door. Ah! Hukan let out a short shout and forcefully covered his mouth. Why is he only left with one head? No wonder he was so surprised. The body of Zhou Bin, which was originally intact, now only has one head left. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Vacation Villa 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Vacation Villa 6. My head was placed directly facing the door, staring at them with wide-open eyes. Suman was also somewhat surprised. When she saw Zhou Bin's body before, it was still intact. Her gaze was alert. The blood that had splattered from her previous murder had already disappeared, but it did not prevent the terrifying creature Humeli from possibly escaping from somewhere. Suman, is that you? Hukan swallowed hard. Isn't that the method you're talking about? Suman raised his eyebrows and noticed that the spot was shining inside Zhou Bin's head. Taking advantage of Hukan's words, he nodded and said, Why don't you give it a try? Hukan didn't believe it, but he couldn't help but glance at a pair of scissors on the wash basin. He picked them up and carefully moved them towards Zhou Bin's head. Suman cautiously retreated behind him, his eyes scanning the surroundings with even more vigilance. At the same time, the hand behind me had an extra dagger at some point. What should we do? Hukan unconsciously turned around and saw that Suman was about to leave the room. His heart became even more anxious and his courage was about to break. What's wrong with you? Is there something here? Speaking, my hands and feet felt weak as I crawled and wanted to walk outside. Suman ignored him and looked at the head slowly emerging from the sink behind him. Finally, she spoke up, Hukan, it seems like it's your turn next. Take a look at what's behind you. Hukan didn't want to see anything, no matter what was behind him, he didn't want to see anything, but his head seemed to disobey his commands and mechanically twisted his neck to look over. Ah! He let out a scream and crawled backwards, his head covered in blood floating behind him, almost touching his face. Xinling, it's not me, it has nothing to do with me. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Suman, save me, I don't want to die, he shouted hysterically, gasping for breath and completely losing his sanity. He grabbed Suman in the air with both hands, trying to save him. Ah! There was another scream of agony, and Hukan's arm was chopped off by Humeli, who had crawled out of the sink. If it weren't for his quick reflexes, his head would have been chopped off. Help me, Suman. But how could Suman care about a substitute ghost? He squatted down and grabbed Hukan's collar, vigorously lifting it in front of him. In addition, his hand with a knife fiercely plunged into Zhou Bin's mouth on the ground. Hukan had already tried for her just now, and his head was not in danger. Zhou Bin's mouth was cut to a pulp, and the spot of light became even brighter. This resurrection card is a tooth. She was about to break off her teeth when an extremely mournful scream rang out. In the wash basin, Humeli's body was tilted and half suspended in the air. Her fingers had already deeply penetrated Hukan's abdomen at some point, even to the point where they pierced through him. The fingertips were less than 2 centimeters away from Suman's scalp. A thick and bright red flowed down Suman's head, and she shook her hand and fiercely pushed Hukan out. The danger stimulated her potential, and even though she had such a strong tooth, it was suddenly broken off by her. Speaking slowly and quickly, the whole process only took 2 seconds. I noticed that Humeli had left Huken with a fierce face and rushed towards her again. She grabbed Zhou Bin's broken head and hit him. But the blood under her feet became a stumbling block to the smooth ground, and she fell very firmly to the ground. It was this slip that made her miss the opportunity to leave. It's over again. She felt a thump in her heart. However, the expected scene of being beheaded by Humeli did not occur. "It's not him, it's not him, it's not him, it's not him," said Humeli as if she had seen something terrifying. After Zhou Bin's broken head she panicked and threw her head away, as if she was mentally deranged. She bumped into the mirror and disappeared inside. No matter what happened, we were saved anyway. Suman breathed a sigh of relief, but ignored the pain on her body and quickly got up. The person downstairs probably heard the commotion and will come up soon. She needs to deal with this place quickly. "Suman, help me, I don't want to die." The mischievous and lucky person still breathed a sigh and reached out to her with a pale face. "I don't blame you for deceiving me into coming here, Suman. Don't you want to know who made that mysterious phone call? There must be emergency medicine in this villa. Help me, I'll tell you everything. Hukan is not a fool either. Suman's attitude change has already shown the problem. She deliberately brought him here to die." "Nonsense." Suman picked up the knife that had fallen to the ground, his tone gentle and eerie. "It's all said, it's your turn, why don't you understand? Now is not the time for infighting, she cannot let the people below know that she tricked Hukan to death. When the time comes, everyone will be wary of her. How else will she play? Also, what I already know cannot be used as a bargaining chip." Hukan was completely flustered. The woman walking towards him with the knife seemed to be a demon from hell. He covered the wound on his abdomen and kept retreating until there was no way to retreat. He cried out in a mental breakdown, "Do you all know? How could it be? Ah, I already know. That poor woman named Xian Ling, didn't you call her name when you were scared out of your wits just now? You looked really ugly at that time. How could you possibly know?" Hukan still had countless doubts to ask, but unfortunately there was no chance. His eyes gradually dimmed, and Suman's knife had already cut off all his vitality. When Aya and others rushed up downstairs, they saw both Suman and Hukan lying in a pool of blood. Beside him lay Zhou Bin's tattered head. The huge impact left everyone present speechless. After a long time, Aya was the first to find her voice and rushed to Hukan's side. Trembling fingers reached under her nose, and she fell weakly to the ground. "Hukan is dead," she murmured absent-mindedly. "Suman is not dead, she is still alive." The people who followed in also sniffed Suman's breath and breathed a sigh of relief. She was still alive, which meant they could know what had happened from her mouth. At the right time, Suman opened his eyes, but before he could even express his full draft, Aya forcefully pulled it over. "Why did Hukan die? Tell me. Why did Hukan die?" "Suman, . She rudely slapped her and said, "Aya, please be sober." This slap shocked Aya immensely. "Do you dare to hit me?" But no one wanted to hear any harsh words from behind, because they suddenly heard Zhou Bin interjecting in confusion, "What's that head? Why does it look a bit like me?" The already terrifying atmosphere is even more terrifying because of this sentence. Everyone just remembered that Zhou Bin had also come here, and they really didn't want to imagine how Zhou Bin would react when he saw his own head. But there's no need for them to imagine, Zhou Bin has already given them the answer. I saw that he, who had been very reasonable before, suddenly turned ferocious, like a roaring beast. He focused on the people around him and grabbed his head. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Vacation Villa 7. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Vacation Villa 7 Fresh blood exploded in front of everyone like a small fountain. Everyone hesitated for a second, then screamed and dispersed like birds and beasts. Suman was clever this time, and before everyone could react, he had already stepped out. Listening to the sound of ghosts shouting behind me, I couldn't help but think, is this punishment? Give them a less clever creeper to scare them. After running for not 2 steps, a light curtain suddenly appeared in front of me. New task unlocking. As of 6 p.m. tomorrow evening, find out the reason why Xianling invited you and obtain key clues and objects. Due to the sudden appearance of the light curtain, her footsteps paused for a second. Bang! At the same time, the familiar sound of forcefully closing the door came from behind. She unconsciously turned around, and those people repeated their old tricks. Aya, the woman, took the lead and locked someone inside the door. I don't know. The people inside are still crying and calling for their mothers to come out. But this time it's different. Her pupils shrink, these fools. Zhou Bin is outside this time. Right behind Aya and the others. Ha! What are you doing again? What's in the room? Why are everyone crying? To Suman's surprise, Zhou Bin returned to normal again. Just his sudden words frightened Aya and the others enough, and they sat down against the ground. What's wrong with you? Hey! What am I doing here? Zhou Bin's face was full of confusion. Aya screamed in surprise as she was about to shout when she saw Zhou Bin pass her and twist the door handle, wanting to open the door. Is there something wrong inside this door? I'll go in and take a look. It's okay inside. Aya was scared and dumbfounded. Before she could react, Suman shouted and quickly rushed over to stop him. It's convenient for people inside. Why cry when convenient? There are hemorrhoids. Aya answered super loudly when Suman was silent. After answering, she stared at Zhou Bin, her face instantly pale. But then, after Zhou Bin's very serious rhetorical question, how did you know? In an instant, I felt ashamed and wished to find a hole to burrow into. He said it himself, Ayapia explained with a smile on her face. Zhou Bin nodded and didn't ask any further questions. He believed this statement and touched his stomach. I'm actually a bit hungry, I'm going down to eat, he said. A crisis was fooled away like this, and everyone breathed a sigh of relief as they watched Zhou Bin's figure disappear. You also know, Zhou Bin will go berserk when he sees his own body. Suman unexpectedly glanced up at Aya and asked. If it weren't for this reason, she wouldn't be able to figure out why Aya wanted to take the conversation. Aya's expression was tacit, she was not a fool. They all noticed Zhou Bin's behavior, but she didn't answer. Her gaze at Suman suddenly turned cold. Don't think that if you save me once, you can fool who can's death away. It's temporarily safe. Aya is starting to settle accounts in the autumn. And looking at the 2 people standing behind her, it was clear that they were also standing on her side. Suman, you have also seen it. We must have more information about the current situation. You have seen the monster Zhou Bin. If you still have something to hide, then everyone will die here. There are still people talking to Aya. Why don't you talk to Aya first? Suman didn't rush with them and only threw the problem back to Aya. I don't know what you're talking about. Aya's attitude suddenly turned bad. Do you want me to remind you? For example, Xinling. It's not that Suman doesn't want to talk about who can's matter. Who can's little matter can be easily dismissed, but the draft she had previously prepared is no longer effective after listening to the new task. Because she realized that in the stories she knew, Xianling had nothing to do with her. It's clear that this task says they have a connection. And perhaps Aya has an answer to this relationship. You actually know Xian. Aya. A mournful shout interrupted her. The bathroom door behind her opened at some point, and Humeili stood behind her like a fierce ghost, with a pair of scissors dripping blood from her hand. Aya still maintained the surprised expression on her face, but blood gushed from the corners of her mouth. She slowly lowered her head, and the originally apricot-colored dress was dyed bright red on her abdomen. Go to hell. Let you lock me inside. Damn it, bitch. Let you harm me. Let you harm me, all damn it. All damn it. Humeli went crazy, repeatedly stabbing the scissors in her hand at Aya's body, each time killing her. Aya's gaze shifted to Suman's body, her mouth opened, but she only spat out a mouthful of blood without making a sound. The next second, she fell to the ground with a thud, losing her breath, and her face still retained that sense of confusion and astonishment. Everything happened between lightning and flint, not to mention Aya, even Suman, who witnessed the entire process, couldn't stop it in time. She muttered words in her crazy mouth, then drew her knife and aimed it at the others. Just this time, without success, the two angry men around Aya rushed forward and restrained Humeli. One of them almost choked Humeli to death in a fit of anger, but it was the person next to him who stopped him. In the end, they just tied up Humeli and threw her into a bedroom, still holding on to the legal bottom line in their hearts. At this moment, there were only 4 people left in the villa. Suman, Humeli, and 2 men that Suman doesn't know much about. In this situation, those 2 men suddenly had a tacit desire to take control of sovereignty. The first thing to handle is naturally Suman, who has a relatively clear mind. They forced her to inquire about the cause of Hukan's death, and even prepared for a confession, but they didn't expect her to fully cooperate and reveal it. The role she played in it was naturally omitted. And because what she said was too terrifying, the 2 of them hesitated on their own and hastily left, saying not to be too careful. Suman looked in their direction and saw that they had gone to the room where Humeli was being detained. Perhaps something will happen, but it has nothing to do with her. Turning my head to look out the window, it was raining even harder outside. She didn't go back to her room, instead she took a raincoat and went out. When she was outside before, she noticed that there were flickering light spots in the fountain. As I passed by Humeli's room, I clearly heard a faint sound inside that made me blush and heartbeat. There are also intermittent sounds from Humeli, such as saying that she can do anything as long as she doesn't call the police. Suman didn't stay much either. Except for Humeli, the remaining 2 didn't know their identities. If they were players, it would really be too leisurely. At such times, they still have the heart to think about it. Aya has already died, and half of the clues about Xinling have been lost. Indeed, the resurrection card is the most reliable at this time. When I was going downstairs, I accidentally ran into Zhou Bin. She already had a resurrection card in her hand, but she wasn't very nervous. She even called out to him and pointed to the room where Humeli was upstairs. It was incredibly natural. You're here. I heard them looking for you just now. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Vacation Villa 8. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Vacation Villa 8. Looking for me. We need to go and see. Zhou Bin seemed to believe her words and turned to mutter as he walked upstairs. They don't know what's going on, they've been keeping secrets from me lately. Suman stared at his back for 2 seconds, initially thinking that this punishment would be something terrifying. It's not just about life or death, but it's quite magical. As for Humeli, the 3 of them can become closer, but they cannot stand on the same line and cause trouble for her. The door opened and a sudden gust of wind blew in, causing Suman's eyes to be blinded by the sweeping rain. But the dots of light in the fountain are exceptionally clear. She braved the strong wind and took 2 steps outside, then a lightning bolt almost hit her face and hit the ground. She frowned and seemed to hear something thumping into the water, like a frog. My premonition is not very good. But if it's during the day, going to the fountain to grab something would be too high profile. Maybe something will be watching, let alone Humeli and a few others. It's hard to say we're going to cause trouble for her. Pinching the resurrection card in her hand, she made up her mind to always step out of her comfort zone and determine where it was safer. When others spend money to buy experience, she treats it as spending her life buying experience. With a decision, the next action became much simpler, but to her surprise, it wasn't as scary as she had imagined. At least when she walked into the fountain, nothing happened. "It seems like I overthought it," she muttered to herself, summarizing her experience. "It's not that dangerous outside either." However, as she approached the spot of light, she felt a chill surge in her heart. She couldn't describe what it felt like, but the sixth sensation was not quite right. The sound of raindrops falling on the water seemed to be infinitely amplified in that moment, and everything around them seemed to be silenced, as if someone had pressed the stop button. She no longer hesitated and raised her hand to grab the spot of light. Just as soon as she touched the spot of light, goosebumps climbed onto her arm, and she reflexively quickly withdrew her hand. She touched a face. Blurred, she seemed to really see a head floating underwater. Looking at the position of the light spot, it was her eyes. A lightning bolt flashed over her head and suddenly illuminated the water surface. Her eyes were staring straight at her. Countless hair gushed out from under the water, and at some point it surrounded her. "Go to hell, go to hell. Suman, you damn it." The head underwater slowly floated out, swollen and turning white from the blisters. Her face was grim, revealing infinite malice. "Suman, why don't you go?" Before Suman could even say the word die, he had already picked up his knife and fiercely inserted the dagger into his eye socket. With a strong thrust, he grabbed the protruding eyeball and spoke in a harsh and infuriating tone, "Why should I listen to you?" She had heard this kind of words countless times before, and apart from the rebellion in her heart, it was impossible for her to waver. Ah! The pain of digging her eyes slowly hit her head, and she screamed as the surrounding hair began to dance uncontrollably. Suman saw something was wrong and quickly took a step back, trying to jump out of the weak hair distribution at the back. However, he suddenly stepped on something and tripped her. What thing? Her hand touched a slippery spot in the water. But the angry hair had already reached her eyes, and she didn't have the energy to explore what she had touched in the water. With a quick shake of her hand, she was ready to get up again. Unexpectedly, her arm was suddenly grabbed by a strong force. It was that slippery one. No, her eyes were wide open, it was her hand. Grab her with both hands. How many people have died in this pool? She wanted to break free from that hand, but didn't want to. She just took someone out of the water. A huge lightning bolt flashed across the sky, illuminating the man's face. He was a man with blood all over his body, and his face was pale and pale. Even with his eyes closed, he was not as beautiful as he looked. At the same time, the hair also caught up with him, but at this point, Suman had no ideas at all. It's not because of men, nor is it because of hair. It was because a huge thunderbolt fell from the sky, and the golden light in front of her exploded, directly causing her to restart. In the villa, Jobin stood by the window holding a small cup of coffee, took a sip, and let out a sigh. "It's really nice, the water pool has exploded," he said behind him, who Meili and the other two were dressed haphazardly in clothes, messy in the wind, with their minds speechless and frightened. This madman, like a ghost, drifted into their room while they were doing business and interrupted them. Now, what are they doing with some nonsense? What exactly does he want? However, there was still a brave one who leaned over and followed suit, taking a glance outside the window. Then, with a trembling voice, he said, "Is there someone floating on the water?" "Maybe it's Suman, I think Suman has gone out." Jobin leisurely added a tone. Suman opened his eyes again and appeared directly in the corridor on the first floor. Glancing at the wall clock, the resurrection took an hour. I touched my pocket, only the resurrection card of the eyeball was left. She felt lingering fear. The dangers of this terrifying world were truly diverse, and she was sanctioned by a lightning bolt. After calming down, I heard a faint cry coming from the hall, with her name faintly mixed in. She took 2 steps forward, and as the lights gradually brightened, she could see that there were many people in the hall who were supposed to be there. They turned their backs to her and surrounded the center in pitch black, crying. "Suman, Suman, why did you die so miserably? Suman, what should we do if you die?" No wonder she heard someone calling her name. It turned out that these people were crying for her. Just. Is their relationship so good? What does it mean if she dies? What should they do? Just do whatever you want to do. She kept following behind, wanting to see what the hell they were up to. I don't know who was too focused and didn't notice that there was an extra person at the scene. That thunder is too big, it was chopped, and I'm sure I won't be able to live anymore. It's no use crying anymore. Humeli threw herself on the charred body and cried twice, unable to cry anymore. She couldn't help but say in one direction. The other 2 companions were scared out of their wits by her words, and their fingers kept quietly poking her from behind, making her obediently shut her mouth. What are you afraid of? It's just a game, isn't it? If you die, just reread the file. Yes, I can read the file, and I'm not afraid anymore. If I want to kill or cut you guys, I won't do it anymore. Humeli was devastated several times and finally began to give up her nonsense. However, she also had a little fantasy in her heart that games can be reread, isn't it? End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Vacation Villas 9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Vacation Villas 9. Ignorant and ignorant. The gentle yet sharp words sounded softly, ignoring the content and not listening. The sound was so pleasant that it made people's ears itch. Suman's head crossed a question mark. That's not right. I haven't heard this sound before. Looking in the direction of the sound, I moved my position slightly and finally saw a handsome and stylish profile nestled in the sofa. He was blocked tightly by those 2 men, no wonder I didn't see him before. However, it looks a bit familiar. Coincidentally, another thunderbolt flashed outside, even the lights in the room flickered. In that moment, the face of the person sitting there inexplicably overlapped with the face that suddenly appeared in her mind. It's the man in the fountain. She squinted her eyes and looked back at her charred body on the ground. Upon hearing the man's words, Humeli seemed to want to kick her body to vent her anger, but her foot had not yet touched the charred body, and she twisted it out of thin air. Humeli screamed in pain on the spot, holding her ankle and crying uncontrollably. The others trembled and shivered. If you speak ill of her again, you will all die. Cry, everyone cried for me. How could you still laugh when she died? It's so annoying. I finally saw her, why didn't it be you who died? The man spoke again, but his gentle voice seemed to be poisoned. Suman is still shocked by the previous scene of Humeli's twisted ankles. She can be certain that it must be that man who did it. Is this the true means of horror? Previously, Zhou Bin's actions were really insignificant. She was pondering in her heart whether she could take this move, while at the same time wondering, was this man defending her? Role mission. Just that face. She was lost in thought and didn't appear in her memory, probably someone she didn't know. Things seem to have become more complicated. Will it have an impact on her mission? Moreover, it seems that from the current perspective, she shouldn't be here. But I still have a resurrection card in my hand, so I'm not afraid. Just as he was thinking about it, the 2 men in front of him were shocked by the magical ability of the terrifying creature and knelt down with a thud. They knelt down, it didn't matter, but they just exposed Suman behind them. Suman was tilting his body to look, and Zhou Bin, who had never spoken next to him, suddenly gave her a push from behind. Her body instantly lost balance and fell towards the black charcoal in the center, with only Zhou Bin's proud and ferocious smile remaining in her eyes. She had only seen that expression on the terrifying face that looked the same as Humeli's. However, there was no time to think too much, and my hand had already touched the actual object, as if crushing a rotten tomato. My hands were all covered in a sticky sensation, and a burnt meat aroma mixed in came from my nose. Before she could react, a sudden suffocation came and a big hand fiercely gripped her neck. "How dare you?" Suman's eyes turned black for a moment. "Damn it, he's going to die again." The anger of the owner's gritted teeth in that voice had not yet had time to vent, but suddenly transformed into doubt, and there was also an incredible ecstasy. "Man." The shackles on his neck disappeared, and the dark shadow in front of Suman was forcefully rubbed into his embrace. His nose was filled with a faint smell of blood, emanating from the man's body. Will the creeper be injured? If she stabs him now, will she kill him? After all, if a powerful horror cannot be killed in one blow, it will be an endless future danger. In just 2 seconds, countless possibilities had already emerged in Suman's mind. The dagger in his hand was about to move, but the man suddenly pushed her away with force. Suman stabilized her figure and raised her eyes to meet the man. The man's face turned pale and he stiffened. She saw panic, fear, and a complex struggle of attachment in those eyes. Man, I almost killed you." A hint of painful struggle flashed on his face. "I'm guilty, I don't deserve it, no, it's all fake, impossible." His face turned pale as he kept repeating unclear words, but none of the people present dared to act recklessly, including Suman, because a black mist slowly appeared on the man's body. There were constantly ferocious shadows emerging from the black mist, but in the next second, something pulled him back into the black mist. The murderous aura emanating from the black mist was real and almost substantial, making everyone gasp for breath. Suman could hear his heart beating forcefully, not afraid, but excited. Sure enough, there were people outside, and there were people outside. Oh my God, this creeper is the strongest she has seen so far. Although it looks a bit uncontrollable, it's enough. It has shown her a direction of hope. One day, could she also become so strong? If she becomes stronger, no one will dare to bully her casually anymore. At this moment, time seemed to have come to a standstill, and all the sounds in my ears disappeared. Among them, Bin was the most unbearable. Under the pressure of the black mist, he collapsed into a cloud of smoke, screaming and being sucked into it. The black mist around the man became increasingly thick, almost enveloping his entire body. Man, don't be afraid of me, I'm not a monster." The man's voice trembled in the black mist, and if ignored, it looked pitifully like a little dog in the rain. He seemed to just want to tell her this, without waiting for her answer. When the black mist was about to diffuse, it disappeared out of thin air. At the same time, all the sounds around suddenly came back. Suman felt that her body could move and quickly looked around. If it weren't for the disappearing Bin, the flickering lights, and the mess on the ground, she would have thought it was just her illusion, a dream she had had. Confirming that the man could no longer be found, Suman finally turned his gaze to Humeli and the others. Since the appearance of the black mist, those 3 people have remained motionless, their faces pale and their eyes dim without any color. With a gentle push, the 3 of them fell softly to the ground. But if they were dead, Suman tried their breathing and was still alive. If you want to know what happened to them, you probably have to ask that creeper. However, she still doesn't know the information about that creeper, nor does she know if it will reappear. And, what is the relationship between them when he calls her that affectionate title? Will Xinling know? The head she saw in the fountain earlier. She took out a photo from her arms. Although the head was slightly swollen, it should be Xinling's correct answer. He and Xinling died in the same pond. What is their relationship? Why didn't she find the presence of that man in the photos she found? Various thoughts in my mind were stubbornly different and in chaos, when suddenly I heard the doorbell ringing outside. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Vacation Villas 10. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Vacation Villas 10. Who will be outside at this time? Everyone is already here. She tightened the dagger in her hand and tiptoed closer to the cat's eye to take a look outside. Entering the eye is an enlarged face that is extremely distorted due to being close to the cat's eye. What? Is there no one around? Through a door panel, a muffled conversation came in from outside. The person who can communicate and converse like this looks like a normal person. But this is not a world that can be explained by common sense. A group of people came to a villa on the mountainside in the middle of the night when it was raining heavily, which is not right. Suman didn't want to open the door, so she tiptoed lightly and stepped back away from the door. She could still vaguely hear the sound outside. The lights in this house are all on, there must be someone inside. Hey! Where has Xiaoyang gone? With a certain distance from the door, Suman suddenly turned around and wanted to go upstairs, but unexpectedly, he ran into a wall of people. In Yuguangli, you can still see Hu Meili and her 3 companions lying on the ground. Damn it, someone came in, why didn't you hear any sound? Suman's heart thumped for a moment, and he picked up the dagger and fiercely plunged it into the person's chest. Don't worry who that person is, anyone who dares to break into a house in the middle of the night is definitely not a good person. The expected sound of a knife piercing into her wrist did not sound, but instead her wrist was fiercely grabbed. The person seemed to be a practitioner, and as she shook her wrist, she felt her fingers numb. The dagger in her hand fell off in response, and the person explained anxiously, "Miss, I'm not a bad person. Please calm down first. I am the property manager here." Property manager. Suman finally saw the man in front of him, dressed in a neat and elite attire. His muscles tightened his clothes, his hair was very shiny, and even flies could slip. He said he was a property manager, so much so. Suman did not fully trust him either. "Can you let me go? She is invincible in front of the collision. It's better to face it generously, and troops for the enemy, earth for floods." "Oh, sorry, if it weren't for you holding a dagger just now, I wouldn't have been able to." "Well, anyway, I'm sorry." Although he was a big muscular man, he still scratched his neck a bit shyly and apologized, "By the way, I'll explain to you later. There are still a few people outside." He ran over her to open the door, and Suman glanced at the dagger on the ground, then at the man's body. In the end, he gave up because he had too many muscles and couldn't pierce the key at once. The door opened and several people rushed in from outside. All men were tall, short, fat, and thin. As soon as they entered, they splashed the rain on their bodies and began to complain, "The rain outside is really too heavy. Damn it, the door won't open even after knocking for half a day. You still have to be Xiaoyang." Halfway through the conversation, someone finally noticed Suman standing on the side and said, "Oh, there's a woman here." Looking over her, she saw 3 people lying on the ground again. "There are still people there." As he spoke, he became unhappy again and said, "Are you the homeowner? We're all here, why don't we knock on the door? Do you look down on people?" The person who was speaking was not tall, but very thin and dry like a monkey. Looking at Suman, he only stared at him and didn't speak. He seemed annoyed. "Do you recognize my shoes? Famous brand. And my clothes, thousands of yuan. What kind of eyes are you looking at? Are you looking down on me? I picked out one randomly, can you afford it?" "I can't afford it," Suman said indifferently. Although she didn't ask a single question, she wanted to hear so much nonsense from him. "What's your attitude?" Her words, neither light nor heavy, seemed to ignite a fuse. The skinny monkey-like man immediately exploded, as if he wanted to rush over and hit her with a fierce force. "Alright, skinny monkey. It's all a misunderstanding. We also need to force this lady to let us stay overnight here." The companion nicknamed Thin Monkey saw that things were not going well and came out to argue. The last sentence was said in an extremely low voice, but the effect was very good. Despite being very unwilling, the Thin Monkey still shut up. The property manager Xiao Yang also breathed a sigh of relief and apologized to Suman on behalf of those people. "I'm sorry, this lady. She's all straightforward and has no bad intentions. These people came here to play on the phone." From Xiao Yang's words, Suman understood that except for Xiao Yang, the remaining 5 also came here after receiving a mysterious call. Xiao Yang's workplace is located at the foot of the mountain. It happened to rain and he encountered a mudslide. He originally wanted to stop it, but these people insisted on going up the mountain. He was afraid of an accident, so he followed over. Then when he arrived here, he found that there was no movement in the room and thought that the owner had something wrong, so he came in through the back window. "I'm definitely not a bad person," the property manager Xiao Yang tried to prove himself. "I know Miss Xian. She has always been in poor health and often faints. I'm just worried that she might have an accident." "Are you Miss Xian's friend? You can call her and she can prove it to me." Suman glanced at him and his gaze fell back on the remaining 5 people. In addition to the skinny monkey, there was also a very fat man who, while they were talking, kept scanning around with his eyes dripping. He noticed her gaze and even lowered his head with a guilty conscience. The remaining 3 people have the normal appearance of ordinary people, who cannot be found at a glance when thrown into the crowd. They sit there with an uneasy expression, like an honest person. I don't know why they also received calls, but Suman currently doesn't have any clues, just like the man who suddenly disappeared. This feeling of being out of control makes her feel insecure. It seems that we still need to look for more clues. Since these people have all arrived, they are not NPCs, but players, so they definitely cannot be driven away. So Suman didn't say anything more, just let them find a room to rest on their own, and then return to their room. In the current situation, she needs to think carefully about countermeasures. Zhou Bin has been accidentally resolved by the disappearing man, and tonight is probably safe. "Wait, these 3 people," Xiao Yang said as he looked at Hu Meili, who had fallen to the ground without any reaction, calling out to Suman. "Drunk, don't worry." Later, Suman didn't pay attention to what happened anymore. Suddenly, so many people burst in, and she didn't look for the resurrection card anymore. There was still one left in her hand, which should be enough to deal with overnight. That night, worried about something unexpected, she didn't sleep soundly either. As dawn approached, she suddenly heard something rustling outside the door. Before she could react, she heard a muffled moan as if something had fallen to the ground. End of this chapter.